This was the first thing she noticed. A small, dark stain near the left pocket of a jacket that did not belong to the man wearing it, barely visible. The kind of thing most people would walk straight past at midnight in a busy Houston emergency room. Dr. Ariana Pierce was not most people. She had been walking out to deal with a triage situation. Charge nurse Pamela had given her the specific look that meant someone in the waiting room was being difficult, and she had been fully prepared to handle whatever minor disruption was waiting for her at the end of a 14-hour shift. What was waiting for her was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair pushed back from a sharp jaw. Sitting in the third chair from the left with his spine perfectly straight and his left hand resting against his side with the kind of careful, deliberate stillness that Ariana recognized immediately. She had spent 11 years learning to read bodies that were lying to her. This body was lying. He was not fine. He was performing fine. And whoever had put that wound in his side had made a serious miscalculation because they had sent him to the one emergency room in Houston run by a woman who could see the difference from across a room at midnight. The man the size of a refrigerator standing beside him rose to his feet the moment she walked in. "He needs to be seen immediately," he said. "Private room, no other staff." Ariana did not slow down. She looked at the large man the way she looked at everything in her ER that needed to be dealt with quickly and permanently. Then she said, in the voice she used when she needed something understood the first time, "In this emergency room, everyone is seen in the order of medical need. Everyone waits their turn. I don't know who your friend is, and I don't need to know. What I need is for you to sit down, let triage do their job, and trust that when it is his turn, he will receive the same excellent care as every other person in this room." The large man opened his mouth. "Sit down," Ariana said. He sat down. The entire waiting room went quiet, 11 people holding their breath at the same time. And the man in the borrowed jacket, the one with the dark stain near the left pocket, the one performing fine, watched this exchange with an expression she did not have time to read. She turned to him directly. "Sir, pain level, 1 to 10. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. His eyes were dark and direct and doing something she could not name. 4, he said. "It's a 7, she said. "At minimum." She turned to Pamela. "Curtain 3, now." She walked back through the double doors without waiting. In her ER, people followed. He followed. What she did not know, could not have known, was that the moment those doors closed behind her, the large man outside pulled out his phone and made a call. 3 blocks away, in a dark car that had been idling since 9 o'clock, 2 men who had been waiting to find out if tonight's target had survived received their update. He was alive. He had been seen. And the doctor who saw him had told the head of his security team to sit down like he was a misbehaving child. One of the men in the car said something in Korean, a short, flat sentence. The other one did not laugh, because what was coming next was not funny. And the woman in curtain 3, the one with the gloves and the steady hands and the eyes that saw straight through the performance of fine, was about to find herself standing in the middle of something she never agreed to. Enter. Something that had already decided it was not done with her. She found out who he was 45 minutes later when her chief of medicine appeared in curtain 3 with an expression she had never seen on his face before. The expression of a man trying very hard to be calm about something that was making it very difficult to be calm. "Ariana," Dr. Marcus Webb said. "A word." She was mid-suture. "In a moment. Now please." She tied off the suture with the precise efficiency of a woman who had been interrupted mid-procedure before and had learned to finish the critical part before responding to anything. She stepped outside the curtain. She looked at her chief. "The patient in curtain 3, Webb said. Kwon Ji-hoon." The name meant nothing to her. She said so. Webb looked at her for a moment. "The Kwon building downtown. The Kwon Center for Medical Innovation at Methodist. The new trauma wing we have been trying to fund for 3 years that was fully endowed 6 weeks ago by a private donor who asked to remain anonymous." He paused. "He is not anonymous. It is him. It has always been him." Another pause. "And you told his head of security to sit down." Ariana thought about that for exactly 2 seconds. "His wound required immediate attention regardless of who he is," she said. "He received it. The security situation in my waiting room was a separate matter and I handled it appropriately." Webb looked at her with the expression of a man who had known her for 6 years and had long since made peace with the fact that she was exactly who she was. "He's asked to speak with you," he said, "before he's discharged, personally." "I'll be in when I've finished," she said, and she went back through the curtain. Before we go any further, if you are the kind of woman who has walked into a room and refused to make herself smaller for anyone in it, this story was written for you. Subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Because what is about to happen between Dr. Ariana Pierce and Kwon Ji-hoon will have you unable to put your phone down. Stay with us. She went back in when she was ready, which was 22 minutes later. He was sitting up on the gurney in the papery hospital gown she had made the security man wait outside for, looking considerably less controlled than he had in the waiting room. The local anesthetic had taken the edge off the pain, and what was underneath the edge was a man who was tired in a way that had nothing to do with tonight. His security man was outside the curtain. She could see the shadow of his feet through the gap at the bottom. "Your chart says you declined to give your full medical history," she said, sitting on the rolling stool and pulling it to a professional distance. "There are things in my medical history that are not relevant to a laceration," he said. His English was precise and unaccented, not the careful English of someone translating in their head, but the fluent English of someone who had been thinking in it for years. "I'm the doctor," she said. "I decide what's relevant." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile. The beginning of the consideration of one. "Fair," he said. She asked her questions. He answered them not completely, she noted, but more than she expected. She updated the chart. She checked the sutures. She gave him the discharge instructions with the same efficiency and thoroughness she gave everyone, which was complete, because in her ER, there was no level of care below complete. When she finished, he said, "You didn't know who I was." "I knew you were a patient with a wound that needed closing," she said, and that was sufficient. It was everything, she said, with the simple certainty of a woman who meant it completely. He looked at her with the same expression from the waiting room, the filing away expression, like she was a piece of information he was storing somewhere important. "I'd like to thank you properly," he said. "Dinner, this week, wherever you choose." "That's not necessary," she said. "I know it's not necessary," he said. "I'd like to do it anyway." She looked at him, at this man in a hospital gown who had sat in her waiting room without identifying himself, without pulling rank, without doing any of the things a man with his resources could easily have done to move himself to the front of the line, who had watched her shut down his security detail and had not intervened and had not seemed displeased, who was looking at her right now with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who had decided something and was waiting to see if she had decided the same thing. "I work Thursday through Sunday," she said. "Monday is my day off." "Monday," he said, like a man writing something in permanent ink. She stood. She picked up his chart. "Follow up with your own physician in 5 days. If the wound shows any signs of infection before then, redness, warmth, discharge, come back immediately." She paused at the curtain. "And Mr. Kwon, next time you come to my emergency room, come in through the front. No more borrowed jackets and no ID. My triage team needs accurate information to do their job." He looked at her. "Next time," he said quietly, like he was noting the implication of those two words and finding it worth noting. She walked out. In the corridor, Pamela fell into step beside her with the expression of a woman who had been waiting to debrief. "He is," Pamela said, at a volume calibrated for the corridor, "extremely. He's a patient," Ariana said. "A discharged patient," Pamela said. Ariana kept walking. But she was thinking about Monday, which told her something about herself she was not yet ready to examine under full clinical light. She did not know yet what the wound in his side actually meant. She did not know yet that the man who had brought him in, the security man she had told to sit down, had been on his phone for the last 40 minutes, making calls, and that the calls were not routine. She did not know that 3 blocks from the hospital, in a car that had been parked and running for 2 hours, 2 men were waiting for information about whether Kwon Ji-hoon had survived the night. She did not know any of that. She was about to find out. The first man came in on Thursday. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, through and through, already partially treated by someone who was not a physician. He gave a false name. He paid cash at discharge. He was young, mid-20s, with the particular build and the particular watchfulness of a man in a specific kind of occupation. Ariana treated him with the same thoroughness she treated everyone. She noted the partial treatment in the chart. She noted that whoever had started working on him before he arrived had known what they were doing. The wound had been cleaned properly, the bleeding controlled correctly. Not a hospital, not an amateur, someone with medical training who was not using it in a medical setting. She filed that note in her chart and moved to the next patient and did not think about it again. Not yet. The second man came in on Saturday. Different injury, Broken ribs, 2 of them, consistent with a beating rather than a fall, regardless of what he told triage. Different false name. Also paid cash. Also young. Also watchful. Also with the particular quality of someone trained to show less than they felt. Also had a small tattoo on his inner left wrist, a geometric shape. Simple. The kind of thing that was either meaningless or very meaningful depending on who was looking. Ariana looked. She had seen that tattoo before. On the first man. In the same location. She stood in the supply room after the second discharge and thought about that for a long time. 2 men in 4 days. Same organization. Clearly same tattoo, same cash payment, same false names, same practiced minimization of symptoms. Both injuries consistent with violence rather than accident. Both in their 20s. Both treated partially before arrival. There were explanations for this that did not require her to draw any particular conclusions. Houston was a large city. Emergency rooms saw patterns that were sometimes coincidence. She did not believe in coincidence the way she did not believe in patients who described their pain as a 4 when it was a 7. Both were forms of underreporting. And underreporting always meant something was being protected. She went back to work, but she kept the charts. On Sunday evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. She was between patients, running on coffee and the particular focused energy of a woman in hour 11 of a 12-hour shift. She answered. Dr. Pierce. The voice was his. She knew it immediately, which itself told her something. I want to confirm Monday, if you're still available. I said Monday, she said. I don't say things I don't mean. A brief pause. I know, he said. I've noticed that about you. You've known me for 4 days. 3 hours in a waiting room and 45 minutes in curtain 3, he said. I pay attention. Another pause. 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. I'll drive myself, she said. Of course you will. And she could hear it in his voice, that thing from the waiting room, that specific register of a man encountering something he had not anticipated and finding it entirely to his satisfaction. 7 o'clock. I'll send you the address. She put her phone back in her pocket. She went back to her patients. She did not connect the 2 men with the tattoos to Kwon Ji-hoon. Not yet. That connection was coming. And when it came, it was going to change everything about what she thought she was walking into on Monday night. The restaurant was the kind of place that did not have a sign outside. You either knew it was there or you didn't. And the people who knew it was there had been told by someone who trusted them enough to tell them. It was on a quiet street in Midtown Houston. 12 tables. Lighting that was warm without being romantic. The kind of place that understood that people who came here were not trying to be seen. They were trying to eat something extraordinary in peace. He was already there when she arrived. She had expected that. He was the kind of man who arrived first to everything. She understood this about him without being told. The same way she understood things about patients from the way they held their bodies. She had worn a deep burgundy wrap dress she had bought in Lagos on her last visit home and had never found the right occasion for. She wore it the way she wore everything, without apology, without performance. The full-figured, fully present woman, she was taking up the full space of herself and making no adjustments for the room. Her natural hair was out, full and wide, and she had gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. He stood when she approached the table. That surprised her, not because it was old-fashioned, but because it was genuine. It was not a performance of manners. He stood because he wanted to. Dr. Pierce, he said. Ariana, she said, we have seen each other's very worst moments already. First names are appropriate. Something crossed his face that was not quite a smile, but was what smiles were made from. Ji-hoon, he said. They sat. The food was extraordinary. She had not expected otherwise in a restaurant with no sign, and they talked the way people talk when both of them are intelligent enough to skip the surface, and neither of them has enough time to waste on anything that isn't real. He asked about her work. Not the polite version, not what is it like being a doctor, but specific questions that told her he had done some reading, had learned something about emergency medicine before tonight, had thought about what she actually did for 12 hours at a stretch, and wanted to understand it. She answered fully, which she did not always do when people asked, because most people asked as a formality, and she could tell the difference. She asked about his. He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, she noted, but choosing his words the way someone chooses words when the truth is complicated, and they have decided to tell it anyway. Real estate, he said, development, logistics, a portfolio of businesses across Houston and 3 other cities. He held her gaze. And some things that are more complicated to describe at a first dinner. More complicated how, she said. It was not a question. It was the voice she used when she needed the full picture and was not going to accept the partial one. He looked at her for a moment. My family built something over 2 generations that operates in spaces that are not always entirely within the lines, he said carefully. I have spent 8 years trying to move more of it inside those lines. It is slow work. There are people who don't want it to happen. He paused. The jacket situation, the wound, that was not an accident. Ariana set down her fork. She thought about Thursday. She thought about Saturday. She thought about 2 young men with the same tattoo in the same location paying cash and giving false names. How many people work for you? She asked. He looked at her carefully. Why? Because 2 men came into my emergency room this week, she said. Both young, both with injuries consistent with violence, both with false names and cash, both with the same tattoo on their left inner wrist. She held his gaze. The same tattoo you have, on your left inner wrist, which I noticed when I was treating you on Tuesday. Complete silence. Ariana did not fill it. She had learned early in her career that silence, after a difficult truth, was information. You let it sit. You watched what came back. What came back from Kwon Ji-hoon was not defensiveness, and was not denial. It was something that looked, if she was reading it correctly, like the specific expression of a man who had just understood that the woman across the table from him was considerably more observant than he had already assessed her to be, which meant his assessment had already been high. They are mine, he said. His voice was very quiet. And whoever hurt them is the same person who put a knife in my side on Tuesday. He looked at her steadily. I did not know they had come to your hospital. I have my own medical resources. They should not have needed to go anywhere else. He paused. That they did tells me the situation has escalated beyond what I was told. Ariana picked up her fork. She ate a bite of food. She was thinking. Who is doing this? She said. Someone inside my organization, he said. I have known for 3 weeks that there is a person feeding information to a rival network. I do not yet know who. I am close. He paused. This conversation is more than I intended to tell you tonight. I imagine it is, she said. But you were going to have to tell me eventually. He looked at her. Why eventually? She looked back at him with the complete, direct certainty of a woman who knew what she knew and was done pretending otherwise. Because whatever this is between us, whatever it has been since the waiting room, it is going somewhere. And I don't go anywhere with someone who keeps things from me that I need to know. She set her fork down again. I am a woman, Ji-hoon, who has spent 11 years looking at human beings at the moment when all their pretense has been stripped away by pain or fear. I know the difference between a man performing honesty and a man who is actually honest. And I know which one you are, which is the only reason we are still sitting at this table having this conversation. He was very still. Ask me whatever you want to know, he said. For 2 hours they sat in that restaurant with no sign, and she asked questions, and he answered them with the completeness of a man who had decided that the alternative, losing this woman's trust before he had fully earned it, was not something he was willing to risk. He told her about the organization, about his father, who had built it, and the parts of what his father built that he was proud of, and the parts he was not. About the 8 years of slow, deliberate work to move the operation toward legitimacy. About the rival network that had been circling for 2 years, looking for a fracture, and who had apparently found one in the form of someone inside his own structure. When he finished, she sat with it for a moment. The men in my ER, she said. Are there going to be more? I hope not, he said, but I cannot promise you that yet. She nodded slowly. If any of them come in, she said, they get treated the same as everyone else. No special treatment, no pulling them out of the queue. My ER runs one way and it runs that way for everyone. I wouldn't ask for anything different, he said. Good, she said, because I wouldn't give it. She picked up her wine glass. Now tell me about the Kwon Center at Methodist, because I have 3 residents who would lose their minds if I told them it was you. And something happened on Kwon Ji-hoon's face that she suspected very few people had ever seen. A loosening. The controlled, careful, managed presence of a man, accustomed to being powerful in every room he entered, gave way, briefly, to something underneath it. Something that was not powerful. Something that was simply a man who was glad to be exactly where he was. He talked about the center. He talked about what he had wanted to build and why. She listened the way she listened when something actually mattered completely, without her attention going anywhere else. They closed the restaurant. Neither of them noticed until the last server quietly brought the check. The 3rd man came in on Wednesday. This time it was different. He was older than the previous two late 30s, the same tattoo, but something about him was wrong in a way she registered before she had language for it. He was not just injured, he was frightened. The specific, contained, very carefully managed fright of a man who was accustomed to dangerous situations and had encountered one that had exceeded his capacity to manage. His injury was a deep laceration to his forearm. It would need sutures, but it was not life-threatening. What was life-threatening, she suspected, was whatever had produced that look in his eyes. She treated the laceration. She was thorough and she was fast. And when she was done, she said, quietly, so that only he could hear, "You're safe here. This room is safe." She held his gaze. "Is there something you need me to know?" He looked at her. Something shifted in his face, a rapid calculation, trust being extended to someone in an unfamiliar uniform because there was no one else in the room to extend it to. "They know about the doctor," he said. His voice was barely above a breath. "The one he's been seeing. They've been watching the hospital." The room went very still. Not the room. Ariana went very still. "Who knows?" she said. Her voice was completely level. "Bake's people." He swallowed. "They think if they can't get to Jihoon directly, they can use someone close to him." His eyes found hers. "You need to tell him. Tonight." She sutured the last stitch. She tied it off. She said, "You're going to be fine. Follow the discharge instructions." She walked out of the room. She walked directly to the supply corridor, where it was quiet, and she called Jihoon. He answered on the first ring. "Ariana, I need you to listen to me," she said. Her voice was the voice she used in trauma, steady, clear, no wasted words. "One of your men just told me that Beck's network knows about me, that they have been watching this hospital, that they are considering using me as leverage against you." She paused. "I need you to tell me everything you know about Beck right now, because I am standing in a supply corridor in my own hospital, and I need to understand what I am dealing with." A silence that lasted 3 seconds. Then Jihoon said something in Korean that she did not understand, but the tone of which she understood completely. "Then, don't leave the hospital, I'm coming." "You absolutely will not come to my hospital," she said. "If they're watching this building, you walking through that door is exactly what they want." Another silence. Shorter, the silence of a man recalibrating. "You're right," he said. And the fact that he said it immediately, without argument, simply because it was true, told her something about him that she needed to know. "Tell me about Beck," she said again. He told her, "Listen, if you are watching this right now and your heart is beating faster, good. That means the story is working. Because Dr. Ariana Pierce is about to do something that nobody in Kwon Ji-hoon's world has ever done before. And the man who thought he needed to protect her is about to find out that she has been protecting herself her whole life. Don't you dare leave this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's go." Beck Sung-ho had been building toward this for 4 years. That was what Jihoon told her on the phone. In the supply corridor, in the flat, precise voice of a man delivering a briefing he had been carrying alone for too long. Beck ran a rival network, smaller than the Kwon organization but more willing to operate in the darkest spaces, the ones Jihoon had been systematically moving away from. He had lost business because of Jihoon's legitimization efforts. Contracts that had previously flowed through gray channels had dried up as Jihoon pulled the Kwon organization into cleaner operations. Beck had been patient. He had been watching. He had found someone inside the Kwon organization who was willing to provide information in exchange for money, and he had used that information over the past 3 months to target Jihoon's people, not to kill them, not yet, but to destabilize, to send a message, to demonstrate that Jihoon's house was not as solid as it appeared. "The mole," Ariana said. "Do you know who it is?" "I have it narrowed to 3 people," he said. "I have been watching all 3 for 2 weeks. I need one more piece of information to be certain." "What information?" "The person feeding Beck information knows things that only people in my inner circle know. I have been feeding each of the 3 suspects different false information, specific, verifiable details that only they received. Whichever detail Beck acts on tells me which person it came from." "A trap," she said. "Yes. And the detail about me about the hospital." He was quiet for a moment. "Only one person in my inner circle knew I had been here, knew I had met you, knew that we had dinner Monday." His voice changed on the last words. "Not much." "Enough. That was not information I shared widely. So, the mole is whoever you told about me." "Yes," he said. "Which means I know exactly who it is." His voice had gone very flat. The specific flatness she had heard from patients when they received a diagnosis they had already suspected. The flatness of confirmation. His name is Doyoon. He has been with me for 9 years. Ariana let that land without rushing it. 9 years was a long time, long enough that a betrayal from that direction had a different weight than a betrayal from a stranger. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Handle it," he said. "Tonight." "And Beck's people watching this hospital?" "Also tonight," he said. "Ariana, I need you to trust me for the next 4 hours. I need you to finish your shift, go directly to your car, and go directly home. I will have people on you the entire way. You will not see them, but they will be there." She thought about that. She thought about being a woman who had navigated every difficult room in her life on her own terms, who had never needed anyone to stand between her and anything, who had been told since childhood that she had to be twice as certain as everyone else in every room, and had delivered on that instruction without exception. She thought about what it meant to trust someone with a part of you that had always been the most defended. 4 hours, she said. 4 hours, he said. "I will call you when it's done." She put her phone in her pocket. She went back to her patients. She finished her shift with the focused precision of a woman who had learned to perform at full capacity under pressure that most people would find paralyzing, which was every shift she had ever worked in an emergency room. At the end of the shift, she went to her car. She drove home. She did not see the people following her, but she felt them, a subtle, steady presence that was not surveillance but protection. The specific quality of people whose job was to make sure nothing happened and who were very good at their job. She got home, she locked her door, she sat in her kitchen, and she waited. He called at 2:17 in the morning. "It's done," he said. His voice was tired in the specific way of a man who has completed something that needed completing and is not going to celebrate the completion. "Doyen," she said, removed from his position. "The information he provided to Beck has been contained. The people Beck had watching the hospital have been discouraged from continuing." He paused. "You are safe. I want you to know that clearly." "And Beck himself?" A brief pause. "Beck has received a communication that makes clear the cost of involving anyone connected to me in his operations. He is a businessman. He will calculate. He will decide the calculation does not work." Another pause. "He will not bother you." Ariana sat with her phone in her dark kitchen. Outside, Houston was doing its late-night thing, the hum of the city that never fully stopped, the distant sound of traffic on the freeway, the particular quality of a Texas night that was warm even at 2 in the morning. "Are you hurt?" she asked. A silence, short but real. The silence of a man who had not expected that question and was sitting with the fact that someone had asked it. "No," he said. "Your sutures?" "Intact." "Good," she said. And then, because she was a woman who had spent 11 years in emergency medicine and had learned that the truth was always better stated than left in the body where it did damage, "I was worried about you. I want you to know that I was worried about you specifically, not just about the situation." The silence on his end was longer this time. "Ariana," he said. Just that. Her name. The way he said it, careful and specific, like a word he had been learning the correct pronunciation of and was finally getting right. "Go to sleep," she said. "Come to my hospital in 4 days for your suture follow-up, through the front door, with your real name." She heard something on his end that was not quite a laugh, but was what laughs were made from. "Through the front door," he said, "with my real name." "Good night, Jihoon." "Good night, Ariana." She sat in her kitchen for a long time after the call ended. She was not afraid. She had processed the fear during the shift, had metabolized it the way she metabolized every difficult thing, by staying in motion, by staying useful, by doing the work in front of her. What she felt now was something different. Something that had been building since a Tuesday night in a waiting room when a man had looked at her like she was the most interesting document he had encountered in years. She was not going to name it yet, but she was going to let it be there. She had spent enough of her life managing things that deserved more than management. He came in on Saturday for the suture follow-up, through the front door, with his real name given to the reception desk, which produced a reaction from the administrative staff that she heard about before she even knew he had arrived. Pamela appeared in her doorway with an expression of controlled excitement that she was clearly working very hard to keep professional. "Your 2 o'clock is here," Pamela said. "Tell him I'll be with him in 10 minutes, Ariana said, without looking up from the chart she was completing. "He is in exam room 2, Pamela said, "and he brought something. For the department." He said it was for the department specifically, not for you. which I think, Pamela. Going, Pamela said. Ariana finished the chart. She went to exam room 2 in exactly 10 minutes, not 9, not 11, because she ran her day the same way she ran her ER, with precision and without exception for anyone. He was sitting in the exam chair looking considerably better than the last time she had seen him in this building. The borrowed jacket was gone. He was in a dark shirt and dark trousers, the kind of clothing that was expensive without announcing it, and he looked like himself, the full version of himself, the version that commanded rooms without trying, the version she had now seen both with and without the armor, and found equally worth looking at. On the counter beside him were 3 trays of food from a Nigerian restaurant she had mentioned exactly once, in passing, during Monday's dinner, when she had said she missed her mother's cooking, and the closest she had found in Houston was a place in Midtown she had not been to in months because the hours of her job made sitting down at a restaurant that closed at 9 nearly impossible. She stopped. She looked at the trays. She looked at him. "You mentioned it," he said simply, "so I did something about it." She crossed the room and checked his sutures with the thorough, efficient attention she gave everything, and they were healing well better than she had expected given what he had apparently been doing 4 nights ago. She cleaned the site. She redressed it. She told him the wound was progressing appropriately and that the sutures could come out in another week. "Pamela can do that," she said. "You don't need to see me specifically." "I know," he said. "I would like to see you specifically." She looked at him. "The food is for the department," she said. "The food is for whoever you want it to be for," he said. "It was for you. You can share it or not." She almost smiled. She did not quite, because she was at work and there were standards, but it was close. "Saturday is my last shift this week," she said. "I'm off Sunday and Monday." He was very still. Not the tense stillness of the waiting room. Something different. Quieter. "Both days?" he said. "Both days." "Then let me have both days," he said. It was not a demand. It was not a performance of confidence. It was a man saying what he wanted, to the one person he had decided he was going to say his wants to plainly, without strategy, without the armor he wore everywhere else. All of Sunday, all of Monday. "I want to show you Houston the way I know it, not the version most people see, the version underneath." Ariana looked at him for a long time, at this man who had shown her his wound and his truth and his world and his vulnerability, and had not once asked her to be less than the full, complicated force of herself in the presence of any of it. "Sunday," she said. "We'll see about Monday." The private smile again. "Sunday," he agreed. He picked her up at 8 in the morning, which she had not expected. She had assumed dinner. Something evening-shaped, and he drove her to a part of Houston she knew existed, but had never had a reason to enter. The early morning world of the wholesale markets, the flower district coming alive in the dark before dawn, the seafood distributors unloading off the Gulf Coast trucks, the whole invisible infrastructure of a city's appetite operating before the city itself was properly awake. He knew people everywhere they went, not in the way of a powerful man who expected to be recognized, in the way of a man who had spent years learning the city from the ground up, who knew the name of the woman who ran the best produce stall and the history of the family that had operated the oldest flower shop for 3 generations. He spoke Korean and English and enough Spanish to navigate the market with ease, and he moved through it all with the particular quality of someone who understood that the people who kept a city running deserved as much attention as the people whose names were on buildings. Ariana watched him. She was good at watching. She watched him spend 20 minutes talking to an elderly Korean man who ran a small stall of medicinal herbs at the edge of the market, learning something about a supply problem the man was having, and then making a phone call on the spot that apparently resolved it, and the man looked at him afterward with an expression she recognized. The expression of someone who had been seen when they expected to be overlooked. She knew that expression from the inside. They ate breakfast at a place with 6 tables and a line out the door, and food that was worth every minute of the wait. They talked the way they had talked at Monday's dinner, but easier now, less careful, the way conversation gets when people have been through something together and the shared experience has compressed what would normally take months into something more immediate. She told him about her parents. Her father, an engineer who had spent 30 years building things in Nigeria and in America, and who still called her every Sunday morning without fail, not to check on her, exactly, but to maintain the thread, to make sure she knew the distance between Houston and Lagos was one he refused to let be more than geographic. Her mother, who had raised 4 children across 2 continents and worked and prayed and cooked and prayed again and made Ariana understand, from the time she could understand anything, that her intelligence was not a gift to be held lightly. It was a responsibility, and responsibilities were not negotiable. The specific pressure of that, she said. The weight of being the one in a family who made it look like it was supposed to look. The loneliness that could live inside success when the success required you to operate at a level that not everyone around you could fully see. He was quiet after she said that. Not the quiet of someone who didn't understand. The quiet of someone who understood exactly. I have been the most powerful person in every room I entered for 8 years, he said, and the loneliness of that is something I have not said out loud to anyone. He looked at her. Until now, she held that. She did not rush it. She had learned, over years of sitting with people in the worst moments of their lives, that some things needed to be held before they could be responded to. The room gets less lonely, she said finally, when the right person walks into it. He looked at her across the small table in the 6-table restaurant with the line out the door, and what was in his face was not the managed, careful, controlled expression of a man who was accustomed to revealing nothing. It was open. It was real. It was the face of a man who had been waiting for something specific and had found it in a place he had not thought to look, in a woman who had told his security to sit down and had not known or cared why it was remarkable that he had listened. Ariana, he said. Yes, she said. They stayed until noon. Then he drove her through the city, the real city, the version underneath, the version he had promised, and she saw Houston through his eyes and loved what she saw. Not the skyline version, the lived version, the layered, complicated, contradictory, magnificent version of a city that was always becoming something. The call came at 6 in the evening. They were in his car, parked on the edge of Discovery Green, watching the last of the afternoon light leave the park, and his phone rang, and he looked at it, and something changed in his face. Not fear, she would not call it fear, but the specific alertness of a man whose instincts had been trained by years of operating in dangerous spaces, and who had just received a signal. He answered. He listened. He said 3 words in Korean. He ended the call. "Doyoon," he said. His voice was flat. He was removed from his position. He was not. The situation was handled in a way that left him free to move. I did not expect him to move this quickly. He turned to her. He has gone to Beck directly. He is offering whatever he knows in exchange for protection. He held her gaze. He knows about you. Not just the hospital. He knows your name, your address, your family. The park was golden in the late afternoon light. Families walking dogs. Children on the grass. The ordinary Sunday world proceeding in its ordinary way, entirely indifferent to what was sitting inside this car. Ariana thought about her father, who called every Sunday morning, her mother, her brother in Lagos, the apartment she had lived in for 4 years and had made into the specific quiet sanctuary that 12-hour trauma shifts required. She thought about fear. She had been afraid before in residency, in the early years of her career when the weight of other people's lives had felt like something that could crush her if she let herself feel its full mass. She had learned to feel it and keep moving. Fear was information. It was not instruction. "What does Bake want?" she said. "Leverage," he said. "He wants to use you to force me to step back from the legitimization process, to return certain operations to the way they were, to give back what he lost when I cleaned up. And if you don't?" Jihoon did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer. "I need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Tonight. Your apartment is not safe. I have a property." "No," she said. He looked at her. "Ariana." I said no. Her voice was completely level. "I am not going to disappear into a safe house and wait for a man I have never met to decide whether the doctor he has never met is useful enough to keep threatening. That is not how I operate." She turned in her seat to face him fully. "Tell me what you know about Beck, his operations, his weak points, the thing he cannot afford to have exposed. Because a man who has been building towards something for 4 years has things he is protecting, and I want to know what they are." Jihoon stared at her. "You are not," he started. "I am," she said. "Whatever you are about to say I am not, I am. I have been the only woman in rooms that did not want me for my entire career, and I have never once waited for someone else to make those rooms safe for me. I make them safe." She held his gaze. "I am not asking to fight your battle. I am telling you that I am a part of this now, whether we chose it or not, and I am not going to be managed or protected or hidden. I am going to be useful. Tell me what you know about Beck." A long silence. Then, Kwon Ji-hoon, who had run an organization for 8 years, who had navigated rooms full of dangerous men without showing a single thing he didn't choose to show, who had been the most certain person in every space he entered for longer than he could clearly remember, said, "Beck has been operating a series of businesses in the medical corridor, supply chain companies, the kind that move equipment and materials, and sometimes things that are not equipment and materials. He has been using the legitimacy of the medical industry as cover." He paused. The documentation for those operations would destroy him, completely. Criminal exposure, federal level. He has been careful, but he has not been careful enough because he never expected anyone to be looking at the medical angle specifically. Ariana was very still. "The medical corridor," she said slowly. "Supply chain companies." She thought about something she had seen 6 months ago, an anomaly in a supply manifest at the hospital that she had flagged and then forgotten about because the supply chain department had said it was an administrative error. "What are the company names?" He told her. She knew one of them. "Pull over," she said. "I need to make a call." She called the hospital compliance officer. On a Sunday evening, the compliance officer answered because Ariana Pierce calling on a Sunday evening was not a thing that happened without a reason, and everyone who worked with her knew that. She described the anomaly from 6 months ago. She named the company. She asked whether the flag had ever been properly resolved or whether it had been closed administratively without investigation. It had been closed administratively by someone in the supply chain department who had left the hospital 4 months ago. She asked for the full file to be pulled and held. She said she would explain Monday morning. She ended the call. She turned to Ji-hoon. "The documentation you need," she said. "I have the thread that pulls it. One anomalous supply manifest that was buried administratively connects directly to the company name you just gave me. If a federal investigator pulls that thread properly, and I know exactly who to call at the FBI's Houston field office, because I testified in a hospital fraud case 3 years ago, and I know which agent handles medical corridor cases, Beck's entire operation comes apart." She held his gaze. "Not through your people, legally, permanently, in a way that he cannot recover from and cannot blame on you." Ji-hoon looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the waiting room the first night. Except this was not the first version of that look. This was the version that came after weeks of accumulation. The version that had the full weight of everything he had learned about her in it. "You are," he said, very quietly, "the most extraordinary person I have met in my adult life." "I'm a doctor who pays attention," she said. "Call your lawyer. I'll call the FBI. We do this tonight while Doyun is still in transit and before Beck knows we have anything." They worked for 3 hours, her phone and his, running parallel tracks, moving with the precise coordinated efficiency of 2 people who were both, in their very different fields, accustomed to high-stakes situations that required clear thinking under pressure. She made her call. The agent she knew answered, listened, and was on the phone with the federal prosecutor within the hour. Ji-hoon's lawyers prepared the supporting documentation from the organization's side, the financial records that corroborated the supply chain fraud, the evidence of Doyun's communications with Beck, the full picture that turned a hospital supply anomaly into a federal case. By 9 o'clock it was in motion. Not concluded, these things did not conclude in an evening, but in motion, in the hands of people with the authority to finish it, moving in a direction that Baek Seung-ho had not seen coming because he had never once considered that the woman he intended to use as leverage was the same woman who would find the thread that unraveled everything he had spent 4 years building. At 9:15, Ji-hoon looked at her across the console of his car, where they had been working for 3 hours, and said, "Are you hungry?" She laughed until her eyes watered, and he watched her laugh with the specific expression of a man who has arrived at the exact place he intended to arrive and intends to stay there. "I am starving," she said. "Feed me." "There is a place," he said, starting the car, "that makes the best late-night Korean food in Houston and has been open since 1987 and does not close until 2 in the morning. "Take me there," she said. He took her there. Baek Seung-ho was indicted on federal fraud charges 11 weeks later. The indictment was 43 pages and covered 3 years of medical supply chain fraud, money laundering through legitimate medical businesses, and a series of related charges that the Houston Chronicle described as one of the most comprehensive medical corridor prosecutions in the city's history. Do-yoon cooperated with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence and disappeared from the city. The Kwan organization, which had been named in no part of the federal investigation because there was nothing to name it in, continued its quiet work of becoming something its founder's son could stand in front of in the light. Ariana was back in her emergency room the morning after the indictment was announced, because the emergency room did not pause for anything, including the dismantling of criminal networks, and there were patients who needed her, and she was not the kind of woman who was anywhere but where she was needed. Pamela brought her coffee at 8 in the morning and said, "It's in the news." And Ariana said, "I know." And Pamela gave her a look that contained everything she had been professionally not saying for 11 weeks, and then went back to her desk. He came to the hospital that evening, not as a patient. He had not been a patient since the suture follow-up. He came through the front door, gave his name at reception, and waited in the lobby, the same waiting room until she had a moment between patients. She came out and found him standing near the window, looking at the Houston evening through the glass. He turned when he heard her and looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 11 weeks. The full, unhurried, entirely specific attention of a man who had decided what deserved his complete focus and was not going to look away. "You're not a patient," she said. "No," he said. "I am a man who is in love with the doctor who saved his life twice. The first time with sutures. The second time with a 6-month-old supply manifest and a phone call to the FBI." He held her gaze. "And I wanted to say that to your face. In your hospital, where this started." The waiting room was full. It was always full. People with their pain and their fear and their Tuesday nights that had gone wrong in ways they had not planned for. All of them in various stages of waiting to be seen by someone who would take what was broken and do something about it. Ariana stood in the middle of her emergency room and looked at this man and felt the full weight of everything she had been carrying since a Tuesday night when she had walked out to the waiting room expecting a difficult patient and found something else entirely. She was a woman who had built her entire life on the understanding that she had to be twice as certain, twice as prepared, twice as capable as everyone else in the room. She had delivered on that standard every day of her career without exception. She had been so focused on being prepared for the room that she had sometimes forgotten to look up and see who else was in it. She looked up now. "I have a patient in 40 minutes, she said. "I have 3 more after that. I will be done at 11. "I will be here at 11, he said. "Through the front door." The private smile. "Through the front door," he said, "with my real name, on time." He paused. "Always on time for you." She went back to her patients. She went back to the work she loved, the work she had chosen, the work that was hers in every room she had ever fought to be in. She went back to it, and she did it fully, without distraction, with the complete precision that was her standard and always would be. But something had changed. Something that had been changing since a Tuesday night in a waiting room had finally fully arrived. She was not just the doctor in the room anymore. She was not just the plan, the standard, the one who had to be twice everything. She was a woman who had been seen completely, specifically, without condition by someone who had sat in her waiting room for 3 hours, without using his name, and had listened to her tell his security to sit down, and had decided in that moment that she was exactly who he had been looking for. Not because of what she could provide, not because of what she represented, because of who she was. The full, complicated, uncompromising, brilliant, softer than she appeared, fiercer than anyone expected, entirely herself woman she was. At 11 o'clock, she walked out of her emergency room. He was there, through the front door, on time. As always, if this story moved you, if you have ever been the most prepared person in a room that still tried to make you feel like you didn't belong in it, if you have ever been seen when you expected to be overlooked, if you have ever met someone who made the room bigger instead of smaller, this was for you. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because we are just getting started and the best stories are still coming. There are things Dr. Ariana Pierce wants you to carry with you. The first, being good at your work is not the same as being seen. You can be excellent, genuinely, undeniably excellent, and still be looked past, looked through, managed. Excellence is necessary. It is not sufficient. You also deserve to be in the presence of someone who sees all of you, not just your usefulness, not just what you can produce, all of you. And the second, the one that matters most, you are not too much. You have never been too much. The rooms that told you that were simply too small. And the right person, when he finds you in a waiting room, in an aisle, in a kitchen, in a borrowed jacket with a wound in his side on a Tuesday night, the right person does not ask you to fit into the room. He looks at you in the full light of everything you are, and he stays. And that is everything. Thank you for watching. I love you, besties. See you in the next one.